Charleston White has just reacted furiously to the unbelievable outcome of the Young Dolph murder mastermind's trial, where against all odds a man accused of planning the assassination of one of Memphis' most beloved rappers actually won his case after his lawyers shredded the prosecution's arguments, paving the way for him to walk free. Something Charleston White is calling the ultimate miscarriage of justice, vowing publicly that he will not rest until this man goes back to jail. This entire saga has been one of the most polarizing and emotional court cases in hip-hop history. Young Dolph's murder was not just another rapper lost of violence. It was the silencing of a visionary who built himself from the ground up, who turned independence into power, who showed young black men that you could own your masters, control your destiny, and still make millions without selling out to the industry. His death shook the rap world in the city of Memphis, leaving fans heartbroken and demanding justice. For months, the alleged mastermind behind the killing, a man accused of carefully planning Dolph's ambush and orchestrating the hit from the shadows, has sat in court battling for his freedom. Nobody thought he would escape conviction. The evidence seemed overwhelming. The streets believed he would never see daylight again. Yet here we are, with his lawyer pulling off what many are calling the most shocking legal upset in recent memory, dismantling the prosecution piece by piece until the jury was left with no choice but to set him free. But if there's one person who was never going to stay quiet about this, it's Charleston White. The self-proclaimed truth-teller of hip-hop culture wasted no time in jumping online after news of the verdict broke. Outrage pouring from every word. Charleston blasted the court system, the defense team, and even the jury, accusing them of being blind to justice, blind to the pain of Memphis, and blind to the legacy of Dolph. In his typical unfiltered fashion, Charleston said this verdict was nothing short of spitting on Dolph's grave, daring to let a man accused of plotting one of hip-hop's darkest assassinations walk away free. And he didn't stop there. Charleston promised on camera, with fiery emotion in his voice, that he would make it his personal mission to see this man back behind bars, even if it meant calling on the feds, sparking public outrage, and stirring the pot until someone reopened the case. To understand why this case and Charleston's reaction are so powerful, you need to rewind to the day Young Dolph was killed. November 17th, 2021, Makeda's homemade butter cookies in Memphis. Dolph, a hometown hero, was gunned down in broad daylight in a ruthless assassination that shocked not only the city, but the entire hip-hop industry. Surveillance footage, witness accounts, and whispers from the streets pointed to a conspiracy larger than just the shooters. Soon, authorities accused not only the triggermen, but also a mastermind, the alleged architect who orchestrated the hit from behind the scenes, providing money, connections, and motive. That mastermind was the man who just walked free. For nearly 2 years, fans waited for justice. They filled courtrooms. They watched every news clip. They shared every update online, promised to make an example out of him, swearing to hold him accountable for ripping a king from his throne. But when the trial began, things started unraveling. The defense lawyer, a sharp, aggressive litigator, attacked the prosecution's witnesses as unreliable, ripped apart evidence as circumstantial, and painted the alleged mastermind as a scapegoat caught in the crosshairs of Memphis politics. The longer the trial went on, the more doubt crept into the jury's mind. And then came the final blow. The prosecution fumbled, failing to provide concrete, undeniable proof tying the accused directly to the murder plot. That was all the defense needed. Against the expectations of millions, the jury sided with the defense. The alleged mastermind, once destined for a life sentence, walked out victorious. Enter Charleston White. If you know him, you know he thrives on controversy. But this time his outrage felt less like performance and more like raw emotion. Charleston respected Dolph. He's often spoken about Dolph as a symbol of independence, as a man who didn't need a major label to validate him. To Charleston, letting the alleged mastermind go free wasn't just a failure of the justice system. It was an attack on everything Dolph stood for. In one of his fiery live streams, Charleston declared, "I don't care what the jury say. I don't care what the courts say. He guilty in the eyes of the streets, and I'm gonna make sure the feds come snatch him. He ain't gonna breathe free air for long. Mark my words." These words have rippled through the community. Fans of Dolph are torn between heartbreak and rage, echoing Charleston's demand for federal intervention. Others, however, argue that the legal system worked the way it's supposed to. If the evidence wasn't strong enough, then acquittal was the only fair outcome. But for Charleston, fairness isn't about legal technicalities. Fairness, in his eyes, is about moral truth, and morally, he believes the streets already delivered the verdict long before the court. The Memphis streets, meanwhile, are buzzing. On corners, in barbershops, in clubs, everyone is talking about how the alleged mastermind pulled off the impossible. Some say he outsmarted the system. Others whisper that money and power manipulated the trial. Either way, the sense of justice denied is heavy. For Dolph's family, this verdict reopens old wounds. For fans, it feels like watching their hero die all over again. But Charleston White has inserted himself directly into the aftermath, becoming both the loudest critic of the verdict and the most determined activist pushing for a different outcome. His threats to involve the federal government are not just talk. Charleston has a history of working closely with law enforcement, feeding them information, and building cases from the outside. Unlike rappers who glorify the code of silence, Charleston has always boasted about breaking it, saying he'd rather save lives than protect criminals. In this case, he seems ready to use his connections to spark a new investigation, to see if the alleged mastermind could be tied to other charges, anything that could land him back behind bars. This is where the story gets even more complex, because while Charleston is furious, his reaction is also dangerous. By going so hard, he risks turning himself into a target. The alleged mastermind, now free, still has support. The shooters, the streets, and even certain industry figures may not appreciate Charleston putting a spotlight back on a case that many would prefer to see buried. But Charleston doesn't care. In his own words, "I ain't scared of no gangsters. I ain't scared of no killers. I'm scared of God, and God put me here to speak the truth." Those words alone have amplified his message, inspiring fans to rally behind him even as critics accuse him of stirring chaos. The hip-hop world has been shaken by the verdict and Charleston's fiery response. Artists from Atlanta to Chicago to Los Angeles have been weighing in online. Some rappers quietly post tributes to Dolph, reminding fans that his legacy is bigger than a courtroom. Others call Charleston a clout chaser who thrives on tragedy. But whether you love him or hate him, one thing is clear. Charleston White has made himself the voice of vengeance in this case.
I need to.
New footage just blew up. Fulio's crew and Young Ace going at it right inside the courtroom.